Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. Calm seas never made a good sailor. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The history of the last half-century is accordingly in large measure a history of financial titans, whose methods were not scrutinized with too much care and who were honored in proportion as they produced the results, irrespective of the means they used. The chief problem is, of course, whether the marching of the general spirit of things is heading consciously or subconsciously toward an idea of extension of boundaries. There are very few things we can know beforehand. We will try, and if we find we are wrong, we will have to change. When a country is at war, we want congressmen, regardless of party, to back up the government of the United States. For every advance that the Japanese have made since they started their frenzied career of conquest, they have had to pay a very heavy toll in warships, in transports, in planes, and in men. They are feeling the effects of those losses. Old women are the secret to the fluffiest cakes. If the fires of freedom and civil liberties burn low in other lands, they must be made brighter in our own. If in other lands the press and books and literature of all kinds are censored, we must redouble our efforts here to keep them free. If in other lands the eternal truths of the past are threatened by intolerance, we must provide a safe place for their perpetuation. If we will not prepare to give all that we have, and that all that we are to preserve Christian civilization in our land, we shall go to destruction. It is a fact increasingly manifest that presentation of real news has sharpened the minds and the judgment of men and women everywhere in these days of real public discussion. We Americans begin to know the difference between the truth on the one side and the falsehood on the other, no matter how often the falsehood is iterated and reiterated. Repetition does not transform a lie into a truth. We have come to a clear realization of the fact that true individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. Necessitous men are not free men. People who are hungry and out of a job are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. We cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. When you get to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. It is the habit of the unthinking to turn to the illusions of economic magic. These unhappy times call for the building of plans that put their faith once more in the forgotten man at the bottom of the economic pyramid. The Liberal Party is a party which believes that, as new conditions and problems arise beyond the power of men and women to meet as individuals, it becomes the duty of the government itself to find new remedies with which to meet them. I have seen children starving. I have seen the agony of mothers and wives. I hate war. What I seek is the highest possible batting average. Against naked force, the only possible defense is naked force. The aggressor makes the rules for such a war, The defenders have no alternative but matching destruction with more destruction, slaughter with greater slaughter. A great man left a watchword that we can well repeat: there is no indispensable man. All free peoples are deeply impressed by the courage and steadfastness of the Greek nation. It is the purpose of the government to see that not only the legitimate interests of the few are protected, but that the welfare and rights of the many are conserved. The most difficult place in the world to get a clear and open perspective of the country as a whole is Washington. In the field of world policy, I would dedicate this nation to the policy of the good neighbor. A wise government seeks to provide the opportunity through which the best of individual achievement can be obtained, while at the same time it seeks to remove such obstruction, such unfairness as springs from selfish human motives. I regard reduction in federal spending as one of the most important issues of this campaign. In my opinion, it is the most direct and effective contribution that government can make to business. Religion, by teaching man his relationship to God, gives the individual a sense of his own dignity and teaches him to respect himself by respecting his neighbors. Too often in recent history, liberal governments have been wrecked on rocks of loose fiscal policy. Government cannot close its eyes to the pollution of waters, to the erosion of soil, to the slashing of forests any more than it can close its eyes to the need for slum clearance in schools. An election cannot give a country a firm sense of direction if it has two or more national parties which merely have different names, but are as alike in their principles and aims as two peas in the same pod. I call for effort, courage, sacrifice, devotion. Granting the love of freedom, all of these are possible. And the love of freedom is still fierce and steady in the nation today. June 10, 1940. Let us never forget that government is ourselves and not an alien power over us. Man's desire to be remembered is colossal. Failure is not an American habit. In this dedication of a nation, we humbly ask the blessing of God. May He protect each and every one of us. May He guide me in the days to come. In this dedication of a nation, we humbly ask the blessing of God. May He protect each and every one of us. May He guide me in the days to come. Do not confuse objectives with methods. When the nation becomes substantially united in favor of planning the broad objectives of civilization, then true leadership must unite thought behind definite methods. I think this would be a good time for a beer. General de Gaulle was a thoroughly bad boy. The day he arrived, he thought he was Joan of Arc, and the following day he insisted that he was Georges Clemenceau. Almighty God, who hast given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech Thee that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of Thy favor and glad to do Thy will. the fate of America cannot depend on any one man. The greatness of America is grounded in principles and not on any single personality. The point in history at which we stand is full of promise and danger. The world will either move forward toward unity and widely shared prosperity, or it will move apart. We have learned that we cannot live alone, at peace, that our own well-being is dependent on the well-being of other nations far away. We have learned that we must live as men, not as ostriches, nor as dogs in the manger. Inequality may linger in the world of material things, but great music, great literature, great art, and the wonders of science are, and should be, open to all. The United States Constitution has proved itself the most marvelously elastic compilation of rules of government ever written. All of our people all over the country except the pure-blooded Indians are immigrants or descendants of immigrants, including even those who came over here on the Mayflower. We must remember that any oppression, any injustice, any hatred, is a wedge designed to attack our civilization. The gains in education are never really lost. Books may be burned and cities sacked, but truth, like the yearning for freedom, lives in the hearts of humble men. People die, but books never die. If I went to work in a factory, the first thing I'd do is join a union. More than just an end to war, we want an end to the beginnings of all wars. I believe that in every country the people themselves are more peaceably and liberally inclined than their governments. Any government, like any family, can for a year spend a little more than it earns. But you and I know that a continuation of that habit means the poorhouse. My own party can succeed at the polls only so long as it continues to be the party of militant liberalism. The Democratic Party will live and continue to receive the support of the majority of Americans just so long as it remains the Liberal Party. Friendship among nations, as among individuals, calls for constructive efforts to muster the forces of humanity in order that an atmosphere of close understanding and cooperation may be cultivated. It is time to extend planning to a wider field, in this instance comprehending in one great project many states directly concerned with the basin of one of our greatest rivers. Research is one of the nation's very greatest resources, and the role of the federal government in supporting and stimulating it needs to be re-examined. The hand that held the dagger has struck it into the back of its neighbor. I venture the challenging statement that if American democracy ceases to move forward as a living force, seeking day and night by peaceful means to better the lot of our citizens, fascism will grow in strength in our land. I hope that your committee will not permit doubt as to constitutionality, however reasonable, to block the suggested legislation. They have given their sons to the military services. They have stoked the furnaces and hurried the factory wheels. They have made the planes and welded the tanks, riveted the ships and rolled the shells. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive, and will prosper. So, first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We must open our eyes and see that modern civilization has become so complex and the lives of civilized men so interwoven with the lives of other men in other countries as to make it impossible to be in this world and out of it. A program whose basic thesis is, not that the system of free enterprise for profit has failed in this generation, but that it has not yet been tried. In the final analysis, the progress of our civilization will be retarded if any large body of citizens falls behind. Without the help of thousands of others, any one of us would die, naked and starved. The money changers have fled from their high seats in the temple of our civilization. We may now restore that temple to the ancient truths. Our true destiny is not to be ministered unto, but to minister to ourselves and to our fellow men. Coming to grips with the reality that our planet is not the only one harboring intelligent life, the universe. The winds that blow through the wide sky in these mounts, the winds that sweep from Canada to Mexico, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, have always blown on free men. New Orleans makes it possible to go to Europe without ever leaving the United States. We have always known that heedless self-interest was bad morals. We know now that it is bad economics. Out of the collapse of a prosperity whose builders boasted their practicality has come the conviction that in the long run economic morality pays. As a nation, we may take pride in the fact that we are soft-hearted, but we cannot afford to be soft-headed. The constant free flow of communication among us enabling the free interchange of ideas forms the very bloodstream of our nation. It keeps the mind and body of our democracy eternally vital, eternally young. There is a mysterious cycle in human events. To some generations much is given. Of other generations much is expected. This generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny. It is the duty of the President to propose, and it is the privilege of the Congress to dispose. The frontier of America is on the Rhine. We do not see faith, hope, and charity as unattainable ideals, but we use them as stout supports of a nation fighting the fight for freedom in a modern civilization. I am neither bitter nor cynical, but I do wish there was less immaturity in political thinking. There should be no bitterness or hate where the sole thought is the welfare of the United States of America. No man can occupy the office of president without realizing that he is president of all the people. The school is the last expenditure upon which America should be willing to economize. I hope that you have reread the Constitution of the United States in these past few weeks. Like the Bible, it ought to be read again and again. I see an America whose rivers and valleys and lakes, hills and streams and plains, the mountains over our land and nature's wealth deep under the earth are protected as the rightful heritage of all the people. If in other lands the press and books and literature of all kinds are censored, we must redouble our efforts here to keep them free. New ideas can be good and bad, just the same as old ones. It is better to swallow words than to have to eat them later. It is to the real advantage of every producer, every manufacturer, and every merchant to cooperate in the improvement of working conditions, because the best customer of American industry is the well-paid worker. Lord, reform thy world, beginning with me. Organized money hates me, and I welcome their hatred. Here is my principle: taxes shall be levied according to ability to pay. That is the only American principle. All work undertaken should be useful, not just for a day or a year, but useful in the sense that it affords permanent improvement in living conditions or that it creates future new wealth for the nation. The success of our whole national program depends, of course, on the cooperation of the public, on its intelligent support, and its use of a reliable system. Books cannot be killed by fire. I suggest a nationwide reading of the Holy Scriptures during the period from Thanksgiving Day to Christmas. We must be the great arsenal of democracy. It is one of the characteristics of a free and democratic nation that it have free and independent labor unions. Our Constitution is so simple and practical that it is possible always to meet extraordinary needs by changes in emphasis and arrangement without loss of essential form. Private enterprise is ceasing to be free enterprise. Self-help and self-control are the essence of the American tradition. There's nothing to fear but a wide receiver who can run a 100-yard dash in under 10 seconds. In our democracy, officers of the government are the servants, and never the masters of the people. Great power involves great responsibility. There are many ways of going forward, but only one way of standing still. The only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. Let us move forward with strong and active faith. The hopes of the Republic cannot forever tolerate either undeserved poverty or self-serving wealth. Liberty requires opportunity to make a living decent according to the standard of the time, a living which gives a man not only enough to live by, but something to live for. We are fighting to save a great and precious form of government for ourselves and for the world. How many people in the United States do you think will be willing to go to war to free Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? But while they prate of economic laws, men and women are starving. We must lay hold of the fact that economic laws are not made by nature. They are made by human beings. If we can boondoggle ourselves out of this depression, that word is going to be enshrined in the hearts of the American people for years to come. But the challenge is always the same: whether each generation, facing its own circumstances, can summon the practical devotion to attain and retain that greatest good for the greatest number, which this government of the people was created to ensure. We must recognize the fundamental rights of man. There can be no true national life in our democracy unless we give unqualified recognition to freedom of religious worship and freedom of education. Taxation according to income is the most effective instrument yet devised to obtain just contribution from those best able to bear it and to avoid placing onerous burdens upon the mass of our people. We stand committed to the proposition that freedom is no half and half affair. If the average citizen is guaranteed equal opportunity in the polling place, he must have equal opportunity in the marketplace. You'll have to learn that public life takes a lot of sweat, but it doesn't need to worry you. You won't always be right, but you mustn't suffer from being wrong. That's what kills people like us. Don't forget what I discovered, that over 90% of all national deficits from 1921 to 1939 were caused by payments for past, present, and future wars. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, it is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. Happiness lies in the joy of achievement and the thrill of creative effort. You are, I am sure, aware that genuine popular support in the United States is required to carry out any government policy, foreign or domestic. The American people make up their own minds, and no governmental action can change it. As Americans, we go forward, in the service of our country, by the will of God. A reactionary is a somnambulist walking backwards. I see 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished. The whole world is one neighborhood. We count, in the future as in the past, on the driving power of individual initiative, on the incentive of fair private profit, strengthened of course with the acceptance of those obligations to the public interest which rest upon us all. Sports is the very fiber of all we stand for. It keeps our spirits alive. True individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. People who are hungry and out of a job are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. No realistic American can expect from a dictator's peace international generosity, or return of true independence, or world disarmament, or freedom of expression, or freedom of religion, or even good business. Such a peace would bring no security for us or for our neighbors. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. If I were starting life over again, I am inclined to think that I would go into the advertising business in preference to almost any other. The general raising of the standards of modern civilization among all groups of people during the past half CE. We have learned the simple truth, as Emerson said, that the only way to have a friend is to be one. We can gain no lasting peace if we approach it with suspicion or mistrust or with fear. We have always known that heedless self-interest was bad morals. We now know that it is bad economics. You sometimes find something good in the lunatic fringe. In fact, we have got as part of our social and economic government today a whole lot of things which in my boyhood were considered lunatic fringe, and yet they are now part of everyday life. Are you laboring under the impression that I read these memoranda of yours? I can't even lift them. Not only our future economic soundness, but the very soundness of our democratic institutions depends on the determination of our government to give employment to idle men. The truth is found when men are free to pursue it. This nation asks for action, and action now. I've fired my last shot. I think I should have another round in my belt. It is an unfortunate human failing that a full pocketbook often groans more loudly than an empty stomach. I am much interested and deeply impressed by what he has accomplished and by his evidenced honest purpose of restoring Italy and seeking to prevent general European trouble. It takes a long time to bring the past up to the present. We defend and we build a way of life, not for America alone, but for all mankind. Sometimes the best way to keep peace in the family is to keep the members of the family apart for a while. Employers and employees alike have learned that in union there is strength. Peace, like war, can succeed only where there is a will to enforce it, and where there is available power to enforce it. I have loved to the point of madness, that which is called madness, that which to me is the only sensible way to love. Do something. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't, do something else. Peace, like charity, begins at home. We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace, business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. Taxes, after all, are dues that we pay for the privileges of membership in an organized society. Self-interest is the enemy of all true affection. The first 12 years are the hardest. To carry adequate life insurance is a moral obligation incumbent upon the great majority of citizens. The forgotten man at the bottom of the economic pyramid. I think we consider too much the good luck of the early bird and not enough the bad luck of the early worm. We know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob. Happiness is not merely money, which is fun for effort and achievement. Every time an artist dies, part of the vision of mankind passes with him. Inquisitiveness is the most useful talent. They fight not for the lust of conquest. They fight to end conquest. They fight to liberate. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. We will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. We are a nation of many nationalities, many races, many religions bound together by a single unity, the unity of freedom and equality. Whoever seeks to set one nationality against another, seeks to degrade all nationalities. The virtues are lost in self-interest as rivers are lost in the sea. Democracy, the practice of self-government, is a covenant among free men to respect the rights and liberties of their fellows. Democracy, the practice of self-government, is a covenant among free men to respect the rights and liberties of their fellows. I never forget that I live in a house owned by all the American people and that I have been given their trust. It is a terrible thing to look over your shoulder when you are trying to lead and find no one there. We may make mistakes, but they must never be mistakes which result from faintness of heart or abandonment of moral principle. Remember, you are just an extra in everyone else's play. Democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education. Real estate cannot be lost or stolen, nor can it be carried away. Purchased with common sense, paid for in full, and managed with reasonable care, it is about the safest investment in the world. I ask you to judge me by the enemies I have made. To win this war, we have been forced into a strategic compromise which will most certainly offend the Russians. Those newspapers of the nation which most loudly cried dictatorship against me would have been the first to justify the beginnings of dictatorship by somebody else. Put 2 or 3 men in positions of conflicting authority. This will force them to work at loggerheads, allowing you to be the ultimate arbiter. We continue to recognize the greater ability of some to earn more than others. But we do assert that the ambition of the individual to obtain for him a proper security is an ambition to be preferred to the appetite for great wealth and great power. The first truth is that the liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in its essence, is fascism, ownership of government by an individual, by a group, or by any other controlling private power. Among us today, a concentration of private power without equal in history is growing. America has been the new world in all tongues, to all peoples, not because this continent was a newfound land, but because all those who came here believed they could create upon this continent a new life, a life that should be new in freedom. It is a good thing to demand liberty for ourselves and for those who agree with us, but it is a better thing and a rarer thing to give liberty to others who do not agree with us. I tell the American people solemnly that the United States will never survive as a happy and fertile oasis of liberty surrounded by a cruel desert of dictatorship. No government can help the destinies of people who insist in putting sectional and class consciousness ahead of general weal. Our national determination to keep free of foreign wars and foreign entanglements cannot prevent us from feeling deep concern when ideals and principles that we have cherished are challenged. The driving force of a nation lies in its spiritual purpose, made effective by free, tolerant, but unremitting national will. No business is above government, and government must be empowered to deal adequately with any business that tries to rise above government. With thy blessing, we shall prevail over the unholy forces of our enemy. Help us to conquer the apostles of greed and racial arrogances. Lead us to the saving of our country, and with our sister nations into a world unity that will spell a sure peace, a peace invulnerable to the schemings of unworthy men, and a peace that will let all of men live in freedom, reaping the just rewards of their honest toil. People acting together as a group can accomplish things which no individual acting alone could ever hope to bring about. Remember always, that all of us, and you and I especially, are descended from immigrants and revolutionists. In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. Let us move forward with strong and active faith. First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Never before have we had so little time in which to do so much. Labor Day symbolizes our determination to achieve an economic freedom for the average man which will give his political freedom reality. Industrial combination is not wrong in itself. The danger lies in taking government into partnership. Be sincere, be brief, be seated. We have always held to the hope, the belief, the conviction that there is a better life, a better world, beyond the horizon. The barrier to success is not something which exists in the real world. It is composed purely and simply of doubts about ability. Men and nature must work hand in hand. The throwing out of balance of the resources of nature throws out of balance also the lives of men. Go for the moon. If you don't get it, you'll still be heading for a star. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of the creative effort.
December 7th, 1941.
A date which will live in infamy. In the truest sense, freedom cannot be bestowed, it must be achieved. I'm not the smartest fellow in the world, but I can sure pick smart colleagues. A nation that destroys its soils destroys itself. Forests are the lungs of our land, purifying the air and giving fresh strength to our people. To reach a port, we must sail, sail, not tie at anchor, sail, not drift. It isn't sufficient just to want. You've got to ask yourself what you are going to do to get the things you want. Rules are not necessarily sacred, principles are. Presidents are selected, not elected. Never underestimate a man who overestimates himself. That is the spiral galaxy in Andromeda. It is as large as our Milky Way. It is one of 100 million galaxies. It consists of 100 billion suns. Now I think we are small enough. The ablest man I ever met is the man you think you are. Change is like fire if uncontrolled. It will consume us. Art is not a treasure in the past or an importation from another land, but part of the present life of all living and creating peoples. The value of love will always be stronger than the value of hate. Any nation or group of nations which employs hatred eventually is torn to pieces by hatred. I do not believe in communism any more than you do, but there is nothing wrong with the communists in this country. Several of the best friends I have got are communists. Democracy alone, of all forms of government, enlists the full force of men's enlightened will. A good leader can't get too far ahead of his followers. Hitler built a fortress around Europe, but he forgot to put a roof on it. Unless the peace that follows recognizes that the whole world is one neighborhood and does justice to the whole human race, the germs of another world war will remain as a constant threat to mankind. There is nothing to fear but fear itself. I consider it a public duty to answer falsifications with facts. I will not pretend that I find this an unpleasant duty. I am an old campaigner, and I love a good fight. The country needs, and, unless I mistake its temper, the country demands bold, persistent experimentation. We think of our land and water and human resources not as static and sterile possessions, but as life-giving assets to be directed by wise provisions for future days. No political party has exclusive patent rights on prosperity. This generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny. A war of ideas can no more be won without books than a naval war can be won without ships. Books, like ships, have the toughest armor, the longest cruising range, and mount the most powerful guns. Dealing with the State Department is like watching an elephant become pregnant. On the European front, the most important development of the past year has been the crushing offensive of the great armies of Russia. Better the occasional faults of a government that lives in a spirit of charity than the consistent omissions of a government frozen in the ice of its own indifference. Favor comes because for a brief moment in the great space of human change and progress, some general human purpose finds in him a satisfactory embodiment. Eternal truths will be neither true nor eternal unless they have fresh meaning for every new social situation. Democracy is not a static thing. It is an everlasting march. Taxes are paid in the sweat of every man who labors. Freedom of speech is of no use to a man who has nothing to say, and freedom of worship is of no use to a man who has lost his God. The best customer of American industry is the well-paid worker. Physical strength can never permanently withstand the impact of spiritual force. Freedom to learn is the first necessity of guaranteeing that man himself shall be self-reliant enough to be free. No man can tame a tiger into a kitten by stroking it. There can be no appeasement with ruthlessness. There can be no reasoning with an incendiary bomb. I want to preach a new doctrine. A complete separation of business and government. The world order which we seek is the cooperation of free countries, working together in a friendly, civilized society. There is nothing I love as much as a good fight. I love it, I just love it. The function of government must be to favor no small group at the expense of its duty to protect the rights of personal freedom and of private property of all its citizens. Every man has a right to life. That means that he also has a right to make a comfortable living. All private plans, all private lives, have been in a sense repealed by an overriding public danger. Goods produced under conditions which do not meet a rudimentary standard to decency should be regarded as contraband and not allowed to pollute the channels of international commerce. I ask especially that no state shall, by law or otherwise, authorize the return of the saloon, either in its old form or in some modern guise. I have a terrific headache. Among American citizens, there should be no forgotten men and no forgotten races. The future lies with those wise political leaders who realize that the great public is interested more in government than in politics. We know that enduring peace cannot be bought at the cost of other people's freedom. To some generations much is given. Of other generations, much is expected. There can be little doubt that in many ways the story of bridge building is the story of civilization. By it we can readily measure an important part of a people's progress. All that is within me cries out to go back to my home on the Hudson River. The structure of world peace cannot be the work of one man or one party or one nation. It must be a peace which rests on the cooperative effort of the whole world. We, and all others who believe in freedom as deeply as we do, would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. More than an end to war, we want an end to the beginning of all wars. Yes, an end to this brutal, inhuman, and thoroughly impractical method of settling the differences between governments. We know that equality of individual ability has never existed and never will, but we do insist that equality of opportunity still must be sought. A radical is a man with both feet firmly planted in the air. It has always seemed to me that the best symbol of common sense was a bridge. Continued dependence on relief inducers a spiritual and moral disintegration fundamentally destructive to the national fiber. To stand upon ramparts and die for our principles is heroic, but to sally forth to battle and win for our principles is something more than heroic. Concentration of wealth and power has been built upon other people's money, other people's business, other people's labor. Under this concentration, independent business has been a menace to American society. These are bad days for all of us who remember always that when real-world forces come into conflict, the final result is never as dark as we mortals guess it in very difficult days. Since I am used to speaking in public, I know that it is useless. Nationwide thinking, nationwide planning, and nationwide action are the three great essentials to prevent nationwide crises for future generations to struggle through. We are going to tax and tax, spend and spend, elect and elect. Wise and prudent men and intelligent conservatives have long known that in a changing world worthy institutions can be conserved only by adjusting them to the changing time. Inside the polling booth, every American man and woman stands as the equal of every other American man and woman. There they have no superiors. There they have no masters save their own minds and consciences. The democratic aspiration is no mere recent phase in human history. It is human history. Economic diseases are highly communicable. It follows, therefore, that the economic health of every country is a proper matter of concern to all its neighbors, near or distant. Whoever seeks to set one religion against another seeks to destroy all religion. True wealth is not a static thing. It is a living thing made out of the disposition of men to create and distribute the good things of life with rising standards of living. America has been the new world in all tongues, to all peoples, not because this continent was a newfound land, but because all those who came here believed they could create upon this continent a new life, a life that should be new in freedom. So many figures are quoted to prove so many things. Sometimes it depends on what paper you read or what broadcast you listen in on. In our personal ambitions, we are individualists. But in our seeking for economic and political progress as a nation, we all go up or else all go down as one people. Private enterprise is ceasing to be free enterprise. Private enterprise, indeed, became too private. It became privileged enterprise, not free enterprise. the American people and their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. The real safeguard of democracy is education. I pledge myself, to a new deal for the American people. No country, however rich, can afford the waste of its human resources. Demoralization caused by vast unemployment is our greatest extravagance. Morally, it is the greatest menace to our social order. If civilization is to survive, we must cultivate the science of human relationships, the ability of all peoples, of all kinds, to live together, in the same world at peace. Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity. The motto of war is, let the strong survive, let the weak die. The motto of peace is, let the strong help the weak to survive. Freedom means the supremacy of human rights everywhere. Our support goes to those who struggle to gain those rights or keep them. Do the best you can do and wait the results in peace. If you have spent 2 years in bed trying to wiggle your big toe, everything else seems easy. Necessitous men are not free men. When you see a rattlesnake poised to strike, you do not wait until he is struck to crush him. We must especially beware of that small group of selfish men who would clip the wings of the American eagle in order to feather their own nests. No man can tame a tiger into a kitten by stroking it. Let us never forget that government is ourselves and not an alien power over us. The ultimate rulers of our democracy are not a president and senators and congressmen and government officials, but the voters of this country. Nobody will ever deprive the American people of the right to vote except the American people themselves, and the only way they could do this is by not voting. No democracy can long survive which does not accept as fundamental to its very existence the recognition of the rights of minorities. When peace has been broken anywhere, the peace of all countries is in danger. Repetition does not transform a lie into a truth. Freedom of conscience, of education, of speech, of assembly are among the very fundamentals of democracy, and all of them would be nullified should freedom of the press ever be successfully challenged. The principle on which this country was founded and by which it has always been governed is that Americanism is a matter of the mind and heart. Americanism is not, and never was, a matter of race or ancestry. We have nothing to fear but missing our massage appointment time. Competition has been shown to be useful up to a certain point and no further, but cooperation, which is the thing we must strive for today, begins where competition leaves off. If you hold your fire until you see the whites of his eyes, you will never know what hit you. A conservative is a man with two perfectly good legs who, however, has never learned how to walk forward. Okay, you've convinced me. Now go out there and bring pressure on me. There are as many opinions as there are experts. A government can be no better than the public opinion which sustains it. We want a Supreme Court which will do justice under the Constitution, not over it. In our courts, we want a government of laws and not of men. It is fun to be in the same decade with you. The only sure bulwark of continuing liberty is a government strong enough to protect the interests of the people, and a people strong enough and well enough informed to maintain its sovereign control over the government. That, in essence, is fascism, ownership of government by an individual, by a group, or by any controlling private power. We are trying to construct a more inclusive society. We are going to make a country in which no one is left out. Chamberlain's visit to Hitler today may bring things to a head or may result in a temporary postponement of what looks to me like an inevitable conflict within the next 5 years. Lives of nations are determined not by the count of years, but by the lifetime of the human spirit. The life of a man is 70 years and 10, a little more, a little less. The life of a nation is the fullness of the measure of its will to live. In time of this grave national danger, when all excess income should go to win the war, no American citizen ought to have a net income, after he has paid his taxes, of more than $25,000 a year. A nation, like a person, has a mind that must be kept informed and alert, that must know itself, that understands the hopes and needs of its neighbors, all the other nations that live within the narrowing circle of the world. A liberal is a man who uses his legs and his hands at the behest at the command of his head. Prosperous farmers mean more employment, more prosperity for the workers and the businessmen of every industrial area in the whole country. The loneliest feeling in the world is when you think you are leading the parade and turn to find that no one is following you. No president who badly misguesses public opinion will last very long. In the formative days of the Republic, the directing influence the Bible exercised upon the fathers of the nation is conspicuously evident. Older men declare war, but it is youth that must fight and die. And it is youth who must inherit the tribulation, the sorrow and the triumphs that are the aftermath of war. The Nazi danger to our Western world has long ceased to be a mere possibility. The danger is here now, not only from a military enemy, but from an enemy of all law, all liberty, all morality, all religion. Men are not prisoners of fate, but only prisoners of their own minds. Human kindness has never weakened the stamina or softened the fiber of a free people. A nation does not have to be cruel to be tough. The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. above all, try something. No group and no government can properly prescribe precisely what should constitute the body of knowledge with which true education is concerned. Peace can endure only so long as humanity really insists upon it, and is willing to work for it and sacrifice for it. We have faith that future generations will know that here, in the middle of the 20th century, there came a time when men of goodwill found a way to unite, and produce, and fight to destroy the forces of ignorance, and intolerance, and slavery, and war. Our government is based on the belief that a people can be both strong and free, that civilized men need no restraint but that imposed by themselves against abuse of freedom. To return to higher standards of living, we must abandon the false prophets and seek new leaders of our own choosing. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. The essence of our struggle is that men shall be free. I have seen war. I have seen war on land and sea. I have seen blood running from the wounded. I have seen men coughing out their gassed lungs. I have seen the dead in the mud. I have seen cities destroyed. I have seen 200 limping, exhausted men come out of line, the survivors of a regiment of 1,000 that went forward 48 hours before. I have seen children starving. I have seen the agony of mothers and wives. I hate war. O Lord, give us faith. Give us faith in Thee, faith in our sons, faith in each other, faith in our united crusade. Let not the keenness of our spirit ever be dulled. Let not the impacts of temporary events, of temporal matters of but fleeting moment, let not these deter us in our unconquerable purpose. All of us in all the Americas will be living at the point of a gun. The public schools shall be free from sectarian influences and, above all, free from any attitude of hostility to the adherents of any particular creed. The people of America are in agreement in defending their liberties at any cost, and the first line of that defense lies in the protection of economic security. In his struggle for selfish gain, man has often needlessly tipped the scales so that nature's balance has been destroyed, and the public welfare has usually been on the short-weighted side. There is no group in America that can withstand the force of an aroused public opinion. Your boys are not going to be sent into any foreign wars. To reach a port we must set sail. And while I am talking to you mothers and fathers, I give you one more assurance. I have said this before, but I shall say it again and again and again. Your boys are not going to be sent into any foreign wars. The ultimate victory of tomorrow is democracy, and through democracy with education, for no people in all the world can be kept eternally ignorant or eternally enslaved. beware of that profound enemy of the free enterprise system who pays lip service to free competition, but also labels every antitrust prosecution as a persecution. In a democratic nation, power must be linked with responsibility and obliged to defend and justify itself within the framework of the general good. The core of our defense is the faith we have in the institutions we defend. I've never been unemployed. I've never been very fully employed either. The true conservative is the man who has a real concern for injustices and takes thought against the day of reckoning. The overwhelming majority of Americans are possessed of two great qualities: a sense of humor and a sense of proportion. It has its distinct and insurmountable limitations when applied to public personnel management. Buying and selling securities on the stock exchange do not start new industries. Big business never starts anything new. It merely absorbs, consolidates, and profits at the expense of others. There is much to be said against the climate on the coast of British Columbia and Alaska, yet, I believe that the scenery of one good day will compensate the tourists who will go there in increasing numbers. We know that there are chiselers. At the bottom of every case of criticism and obstruction we have found some selfish interest, some private axe to grind. How many people in the United States do you think will be willing to go to war to free Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? Frankly, I do not know how to effect a permanency in American foreign policy. Our security is not a matter of weapons alone. The arm that wields them must be strong, the eye that guides them clear, the will that directs them indomitable. I have an unshaken conviction that democracy can never be undermined if we maintain our library resources and a national intelligence capable of utilizing them. I do not look upon these United States as a finished product. We are still in the making. Thanks for watching. I hope you feel inspired to chase your dreams. If you liked the video, please subscribe for more. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your loved ones. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts and favorite motivational quotes. See you in the next one.